Welcome to the Heal You podcast, a beautiful place where we can discover the stories of majestic healers, how they came to be, and some of the healing miracles that have transpired. Through these fascinating interviews with healers, discover how these mystics are interpreting and stepping into the new world, and how you can embrace some new perspectives to bring self-healing into your life. Now here's your host, self-healing mentor and passionate believer in the power of mystic healing, Jodie Baker.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me. Today it gives me great pleasure to interview Hay House published author Elizabeth Brown. Her story is remarkable and I know you'll be fascinated. Elizabeth pioneered a unique tailor-made healing protocol called Causative Diagnosis. By accessing the information field of your body by using Dowsing, she can determine causative factors behind health conditions. I came across Elizabeth many years ago when my sister-in-law, who I have the utmost respect for, told me she's been using Elizabeth's services for 10 years. My experience with Elizabeth has been so astonishing that I work with her on the health plans of all three of my children, and of course myself. Today, I'm so excited to find out more about dowsing and how it works. And of course, to find out more about Elizabeth and how she discovered and nurtured this astonishing talent. Elizabeth, I'm really excited to interview you because ever since I had my first consultation with you, my head was just spinning. What are you doing? How are you doing this? It's amazing. And it changed my entire life. And
my goodness,
it's huge. So to get the opportunity to find out more about you and how you come to do the incredible work that you do is, a true honour for me. So thank you.
Actually, the honour's all mine, and I'm really delighted to be part of this venture that you're doing to help others, because I think that's what we're all driven by, isn't it? I was writing yesterday that being in service is really the vocation, isn't it, for all light workers?
Absolutely, and all this is becoming really apparent these days, isn't it?
In your face.
Surfacing quick, smart. So yeah, I was really lucky. We'll get to this part a bit further down the track, but you just mentioned it now, and just it feels like an acceleration of people finding their callings is sort of happening. I feel it personally, but I see it around quite a lot. It's really quite magical.
I think it's magical for many people. I think it's equally terrifying for a lot of other people who don't really understand necessarily what they're going through.
Yeah, 100%. And I did before we go into that, actually, I just wanted you to have a little bit of introduce yourself, I suppose. Just sort of give us a little bit of a run for people who haven't worked with you before, just to give us a bit of a rundown of the work that you do.
Well, very simply, I'm a dowser or a diviner, but that means many things to many, many people. I use the dowsing process specifically for a very practical end, but dowsing to most people is an old man walking along with a wooden fork stick looking for underground water.
So I just wanted to clarify that so people are hearing that correctly. So it is literally the two sticks that you think of, exactly what you're thinking it is. It probably is that. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people use a pendulum. I actually use L rods, metal, with they're actually silver rods, one in each hand. But yes, traditionally through the centuries, dowsing has been used to find water, to locate underground minerals, to locate lost or hidden things, by doctors and health practitioners to identify anything really to do with health. It's used by the police, by the way, to find lost or buried bodies. It's used by the military to detect underground mines or bombs, unexploded or live. It's used anything that's hidden or is not be able to see with the naked eye, or is it may be finding information, a thought or a thought form or knowledge. So anything that's not immediately obvious to the five senses. So the way I use it or apply it is for health, and I've pioneered my own process called Causative Diagnosis, which is not diagnosing a medical condition or ill health. It's actually identifying the causative factors behind a condition or a set of symptoms that may not have any medical label. And cancer is my speciality, and then really any other set of symptoms people come with. Well, I can't sleep, or my hair's falling out, or I've got a rash, or really what I see it as an underlying chronic metabolic imbalance in the body. And so, and yes, also with people may come and say, I've got breast cancer, or I've got lung cancer, or whatever. And the benefit of all this is because once they know the underlying causes of the condition, it means the causes can be addressed rather than just merely managing or treating the symptoms with pharmaceutical products, which often in themselves cover up the underlying imbalance anyway. So it leads to a much more profound level of healing rather than just managing symptoms for years and years. I'm a good case in point of people. I was in an article on skin care and skin conditions once in a magazine, and I was astonished about 3,000 inquiries later. And people have had this skin conditions manifesting as eczema or acne or whatever they were, psoriasis, for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in some cases, and were in despair because all they were given was stuff to manage the symptoms or try and suppress the symptoms. But once with a skin condition, once you've identified an underlying cause, then it can be addressed, and then that leads to I'm not going to say curing and I'm not going to say healing, but it leads to the absence of symptoms and the body going back into balance.
And it's just really horrific to hear stories like that, because I feel like we've been groomed unconsciously to only look to one source for potential healing. Go to your doctor, and if they can't give you the answer and the pill to fix that, like, people are lost at that point, which is absolutely devastating, considering, what you talked about is about a holistic solution to what the problem is. You've got to look at the whole situation of your body to find out what's going on. And since the beginning of time, ancient wisdom has had all of those answers in it, but it's kind of been washed out of our heads, and it's not even, anyone who kind of does that is regarded as hocus pocus stuff or woohoo, which is madness, because it actually makes more sense than anything. Because, sorry to say that, but if you look at someone like Medical Medium at the moment, it's just one of those things where people just think it's crazy, but it's healing so many people. Like, it's there. The results are there.
I think the killer phrase is, especially with serious illnesses, is there's nothing more that can be done. And it takes not only all hope away, but as we know, the human mind, the human spirit, reacts very dramatically to a placebo or a non-placebo. A good example of that was my mother, who was kept alive for years by 5 deadly drugs, but she believed that they were going to work for her because the consultant had said, we're taking all these, you'll live forever on these. And she believed that.
Mm.
But it's when all hope is taken. There's nothing more. If only practitioners in that position could say, there's nothing more than we can do. However, you might want to try this, this, or this.
Mm.
And it allows people to explore their own healing journey. And I've had, I have so many cancer, my patient or client, come who've been told there's nothing more that can be done. You put your affairs in order.
And that's as you said, that's the killer blow right there.
Yeah. And really, I mean, with somebody like medical medium who has astonishing skills, the proof is in the results, and that's what I always say. People come to me and say, "Well, just it's entirely up to you. It's your journey. It has to be something that is within your belief system, really. But have a look at my testimonials, and you will get some sort of idea of what is possible."
But there we go, right there. And I just want to touch on the medical medium thing where he, makes the same point all the time. Like, science and research don't have all the answers, because if they did, like, nothing's been cured since I've been alive. I've never seen any chronic illness being cured. All I've seen is just lots of pills that go along with it, apparently manage stuff, but nothing's been cured. Nothing, no arthritis, MS, like there's so many things that have not been cured, but yet people still put all their faith in that and they just completely disregard. And there's so much evidence out there. I mean, there's so much information that's right there for people to take. You just look at the Heal documentary on Netflix. Like, it's there on Netflix where everybody lives. They live in Netflix. It's right there as well, But anyway, I don't want to focus on the negative, because there's obviously heaps of people who are taking advantage of it, because you're really busy and you're healing lots of people, and I'm talking to you, and there's lots of people that I want to talk to about this. So it's... Can
I just say, because I'm a little sensitive around this, my personal way of looking at it is that I don't heal people.
Yes, okay.
But I give them the information that enables them to heal.
Which is exactly what I'm about, actually, because like my whole thing is called Heal You, because you heal yourself. Absolutely. So
yes,
I completely...
The body heals itself. But it's handy to have the information of how to do it, rather, as somebody said to me yesterday, well, I've spent a fortune on, going to all these therapists and going to all these healing modalities and nothing has worked. It's not that the modalities wouldn't work, it's that it's more than likely that they're not the right ones for you. And that's what I do, is identify not only the causative factors, but also the optimal practitioners and the optimal procedures or lifestyle changes that will lead to the healing.
And I'm going to get to that, because that is my first session with you when you did my health overview or my health reading. It was mind-blowing, literally mind-blowing. But before we get into that, I want to go back to you, because first of all, you've talked about this amazing technology, ancient technology called Dowsing, and I'd love to hear about how you came to be involved with it. Like, how does that even happen? Like, little kids watching TV, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'm going to be a dowser.
I wanted to be a ballerina, actually.
Ballerina, that's nice.
And then when it became very apparent that that was rather beyond my physical reach. I'd rather be sitting down with my nose in a maths book than moving about.
Tell me about you as a child, because before you go on, I just want to touch on that. I feel like everybody's childhood story is probably one of the most important stories of their lives, and I'd love to sort of get to know Elizabeth as a child.
I think you're going to find my childhood quite disappointing.
I'll find something. Don't worry.
There was nothing, but I was very detached from my family. My mother, physically detached, because when I was born, she had TB, and tuberculosis, and I was literally taken away from her.
You had brothers and sisters. Where did you fit in that?
Not at the time. So she wasn't allowed to touch me for a year. Wow. I was brought up by various family members. So there's never that real bond there. And my father was, my father really didn't like women, had a real problem with women. I mean, he was serious. And in fact, he was hoping for a boy. My name was supposed to have been Stephen. And when I turned out to be a girl, he was very disappointed, and things didn't really get better after that.
Right.
Until, sort of years and years and years and years later. But he was not able to relate to me at all. And so I was quite a lonely child and very adult-like. And I did, I mean, I think, well, I wasn't aware that I had any abilities, because you're not, are you? I mean, you don't know that what you're feeling is not what everyone else is feeling. But I had a friend. I had what my parents called an imaginary friend that I spent all day and every day with. And later on, of course, years later, I discovered, of course, it was a spirit child that I'd been playing with.
Wow! And could you see this person?
Yeah, but not sort of, how would a child describe it? Not in solid form, but definitely as an outline, and definitely. And I think it was he, more male than female anyway, was always around, and much to the embarrassment of my mother, when I used to shout at people when perhaps we were on the bus and somebody tried and sit next to me, and I'd say at the top of my head, "You can't sit there." Hoddy's sitting there. And
what did you call him?
Hoddy.
Hoddy, right? Okay.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I was about 14,
really,
when I had. As it happens, fate, I met two people, a couple who recognized, for some reason, and I was 14, recognized abilities that I had, and took me under their wing and gave me a voice. Mm. And then they trained me throughout my teens in various, training my psychic sensitivities and skills, because they recognized something that, my parents would never have done in a million years.
And how did they handle it? Did they sort of fight it, or they were happy to go along with it?
They were very suspicious when this couple turned up in a van at our house, and I'd said, they'd invited me to lunch, and they took me to their apartment, and my parents sort of grilled them a little bit, and but then they let me go. They trusted them, and they started to train me, really.
And they had skills in dowsing, or was that something that was found, that you found?
No, dowsing was something I found. They taught me psychometry. They taught me. They first of all introduced me to that. Had to open my mind to a flow of energy that's out there. And what we did a very basic Ouija board, and the glass was whizzing around the table. And then they said to me, "Now, what we're going to do, we're both going to take our fingers off the glass, and we're going to allow you, you keep your finger on, and we'll see what happens." And the glass just took off. And I will never, to my dying day, forget that pull of energy pulling my arm across the board, the power of it. And what they were trying to do, and they said it, and it's funny because I use this today when I'm teaching dowsing and I'm doing a course, is I use a transistor radio, old-fashioned transistor radio, that's picking up through the ethers radio stations all over with an aerial, and that what they were doing in the simplest terms was teaching me that there was more to the universe than what you can see with the eye, and there's a flow of energy all around us. and inners.
Wow. And was Hoddy there at that stage?
No, Hoddy kind of disappeared when I was about 5.
Uh-huh.
And we did move house at that time. So yeah, Hoddy went. But that was fine.
Yeah, that's amazing. So obviously, on a spiritual level, like, it was all kind of lined up that these people were there to nurture you. Like, for whatever reason, you didn't want to have parents to do that job for you, so you chose ones that that you were quite detached from, and that learning from these other crazies in a van. That sounds amazing. And how long did your relationship last with these guys? Was that
to this present day?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, they
are the dearest people in my life.
Yeah.
They're elderly now, of course, but yes, very special to me.
And what sort of things were these guys doing as a vocation, or mystics, or what sort of?
They were both civil servants.
I was about to say that. I said, by day, but by night they're on the Ouija board.
No, not a Ouija. They didn't use a Ouija. That was just a tool to demonstrate.
Yeah.
I mean, they went on to teach me many, many other things. And he also is a very accomplished photographer as well. But obviously they're retired now, and extraordinarily creative people. I mean, they live life on every level of creativity.
Amazing.
So I was so blessed to meet them.
Yeah. And so you started learning that skill, and you mentioned that you would rather have your head in a maths book. So you were at what point? I'm just trying to figure out, were you headed for a different type of career at one point?
I left school. I actually got a place at the top drama school in the UK, because then after the ballerina went out the window, I decided I wanted to be an actress. And I did actually get a place. There were only 14 places on the course, and 800 people applied, and I got a place. And however, once I got there, again, I realized it wasn't the right path for me. So I dropped out. It was university. I dropped out, and I went through a very painful period of being unemployed. But then very quickly after that, I got spotted by it was the marketing director of Cadbury Schweppes, and asked to do a test shoot, and I became a model. I was a model for 10 years. I was then I moved and lived in America for 6 years, and I was an interior designer in New York, and then Washington DC, and then when I finally came back to England, because of my international experience, I worked for an international relocation company, moving people, the families around the world who are top executives in companies, blue chip companies. I did that for quite a few years, and then after that, I took the plunge and became a professional dowser. Although I was taught to dowse in 1989 by somebody I met, again, thank you, universe, who was a client of mine in New York, interior design client. And I flew out to his home, and again, he must have known, but he took me outside and said, "Look, I can do these dowsing rods." And oh yeah, right. And I'd heard about dowsing rods, but dowsing for water, and also because I lived in an area of England where there was a lot of mining at one point, and I was given to hold a pair of dowsing rods. And I said, well, what do they do? And then this person said, oh, my father was a dowser down the coal mines, and they used these to find the coal often. A lot of miners were dowsers. And I said, oh, and I picked them up, and immediately these things went whizzing around in my hands. And oh my God. And that was in the mid 80s. And then when I was with this client, he said, this is why. And he showed me how he'd found a water well, and his water well out on in Virginia. It was out in Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia, in the countryside. And then he went on in one night to teach me how to dowse. So that was 89.
Gosh, and that was something, you know, back then there wasn't a lot of talk about that type of technologies in the 80s.
If you look for it, there was. My whole 6 years in America was one very long spiritual journey where I met.
That's when Shirley MacLaine was doing her thing, where she was coming.
Absolutely. In fact, the first book I read when I was out there was Shirley MacLaine's book, Out on a Limb.
Yes.
And that led me to read all the other books, and all the other books mentioned in that book, those books, and all the other. And then I joined the Edgar Cayce Society and the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. And I actually went there and met a lot more of my heroes. And it just became this extraordinary gathering force of a spiritual journey, meeting many of my heroes and progressing right until the week before I left. I ultimately met the person who probably was to change my life, the course of my life. And so from the minute I landed until the week before I left, it was a spiritual journey, a karmic journey.
Wow.
Huge karmic. Because I was actually very ill when I arrived. I collapsed and hemorrhaged and all sorts of things, and I was taken to. I said, I don't do doctors.
How old were you? Can I just find out how old were you when you got there?
I was in my, I can't remember, in my late 20s or 30s,
yeah.
And I went. It was one of the flashiest, glitziest hotels in San Diego, downtown San Diego, and I collapsed in the foyer, which was extremely inconvenient for the management.
Wasn't the entrance you were thinking it was going to be?
Well, I'm sure they thought I was on drugs, and Sidney Poitier was in the foyer, and Mikhail Baryshnikov and the New York Ballet and everything, and the manager said, basically, get her out of here. So I refused to go to a medical hospital, but forgetting I was in California, and they took me up to a homeopathic hospital in the hills above San Diego, and I lay there on this gurney, feeling I was just basically felt I was going to die or wanted to die. And this doctor came in, and the door opened. This doctor came in, standing there in his white coat, and I'm lying flat out on this stretcher type thing. And he said, so what's going on? And I said, no, I've just left. I've sold my house, sold my homes, got rid of all my belongings, moved countries. It just sounded really pathetic. I was sobbing. And I'm here in this country. I don't want to be here. And he said, he looked at me, and there was this sort of pause and this sort of look on his face. And he said, when's your birthday?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what is this man asking my birthday? And then when I realized what the answer was, what was going to be, I started to smile, and I said, it's the 4th of July. And he said, and you think that you're not here for a reason? You know, American Independence Day, the 4th, the biggest day of the year.
Yeah.
And my birthday's the 4th of July. And that's when I began to realize, you know, even though I went kicking and screaming, and I never imagined it was going to be the journey it was.
Oh, it just sounds like there was a hell of a lot of grace going on in that journey. That's beautiful. It's Great story. And how long was that whole period of time? How long did that go for?
It was nearly 6 years.
Yeah. What brought you home?
Very practical reasons, actually. The company I was working for closed down. I was running a showroom in Washington, D.C., and the company I was working for were having financial difficulties, and they had 4 showrooms: New York, D.C., Greenwich, and LA, and they closed the showrooms one by one, and mine was the second to go.
So it was, and that's when you came back, that's when you decided it was time to go out. And were you doing some sort of facilitating healing along the way? Because you learnt that skill of, younger, and then you were doing more conventional work. But along the way, were you sort of tapping into that talent of yours on the side of people that come into your life?
In a very low-key way. It wasn't until I actually got back to the UK, it was 92, I think, 1992, that I joined the British Society of Dowsers. And then my education became very, very structured and much more in depth. And I trained as a water dowser. But then I moved into environmental energies, earth energies, geopathic stress type things.
I'd love to hear more about the actual dowsing, like how, you mentioned a couple of times how it's for hidden things. So is there some sort of story that goes along with dowsing as a magic? You know what I mean?
I think it's very unmagical in a way. And there's some very serious science to back it all up.
Yeah, beautiful. That's what I'd love to hear.
It's totally in accord with quantum physics. Yeah. Totally in accord. And the basis of quantum physics is that we're living in the universe is a field of information, stored information that we can access. And I mean, the ancients called it the Akashic field, and it's given many names. I mean, sometimes the collective unconscious, or the consciousness, or the A field, the field, the quantum field. Sometimes the universal database, the quantum hologram as well. I mean, there's the divine matrix, even, or the mind of God. And it's correlated. The scientific side is correlated with really all the ancient spiritual concepts, and the Vedas called it the field, the Atma. So there's a field of information, and because we are consciousness itself, we transmit. We're energy. A human being is an energy field, basically, that receives and transmits information, a transceiver. What we're doing is when we extend consciousness, we're actually accessing this field of information. I mean, basically, we're all doing, whether knowingly or not knowingly, but dowsing is really a deliberate and directed intent to access that information. So you think of a question, you put it out there, and then you stand back totally objectively, without any vested interest, and get the answer. But everyone's doing the same thing, but unknowingly. I mean, when the phone rings and you know who it is. So unknowingly, really everyone is dowsing in a way when you have intuitive feelings. So, for example, if the phone rings and you know who's on the other end, when you're driving along and you suddenly have this feeling that you should slow down around the next corner because there's something there that might be dangerous, and you slow down, and there's roadworks or a horse or something. So people access this information unknowingly. But with dowsing, you do it with directed and deliberate intent. And so really, we're like, there's a giant database of information, and each person is really like a computer terminal, and you can access that information, whether it's information about water or it's information about hidden or buried things, whether it's, with me, I'm accessing the information field of the human body. So I sit here in the south of France, and then I access the information of the client, whether they're in New York or in Sydney or wherever they are, to get the information in order to help them return their body back to balance.
I'd never heard that before about. I mean, that's incredible. It's made me see it in a completely different light. And my first question would be, well, first of all, I hadn't made that connection between the quantum field and the Akashic records and dowsing. Hadn't seen that as being all one, to be honest. It's just, I can visualize what you mean now. It's just, it's everything, isn't it? So
there's two things. I do have footage of my doing that and dowsing and accessing a client's information field at distance, using a special, in live time, in real time, a photography, and you can see the changes in the information field. But also, I do explain it in my book quite more in depth and a lot more eloquently than I'm perhaps doing it now. But
really amazing. It's great.
So you can actually read through all the steps of how it works, because we're looking at also stuff like quantum entanglement and everything else. But basically, the ancients' concepts and quantum science are in total accord, and our brains actually work in accord with quantum principles. Although I believe that dowsing is a whole body experience, because it has to, when the rods move, it's actually you physically doing it, but the direction they move in, you're not controlling that. Well, you shouldn't be controlling that.
So you're holding the rods, and quite away from you. Your hand is moving that, or the external energy is pushing it. You know what I mean? It's sort of...
No, it's. I believe it comes internally from the signals that one picks up through, and it has to translate into the physical. And it's micromuscular movements in the body that are prompted to move in a certain direction. But you have to train yourself, say this is no in this direction and that's yes in that direction.
Which is hilarious, because all the jokes I made with you in the past about ask the gods, well, actually you're the god.
No.
In a way, like in that comic way, you kind of are, because you're doing the movements. You're actually accessing that field. You're receiving that
the consciousness field. Yes,
you're receiving it. Yeah, that's really interesting. And because I'm really glad to hear that too, because I knew that you taught it, and there was a book, and I always thought, I would love to read that. And this sort of comes back to when I was a child. I was always so fascinated with mystical people, as how I would see them back then. And, out on a limb, Shirley MacLaine in the 80s, I would have been, I don't know, young, and just finding that movie and just being completely obsessed with it. Like, that was sort of like what first sparked my interest in this invisible world. And, I always just felt like, I wish throughout my whole life, anyone who has any kind of talent like what you've got, I'd be so jealous and think I would love to be like that, and always wondering, is it something that you're born with or something that you can learn? And the fact that you'd written a book about teaching people that, I was just sort of initially or immediately just put it away as if that, but I don't have that skill. Even if I read it, I still wouldn't have that skill, but apparently not.
But you do, because we all have the same equipment.
Yeah.
We all have the same physical, mental, spiritual, emotional equipment. The only thing that is different between people is belief. And people will say, "Oh no, I wouldn't like to do that. No. Oh, I couldn't possibly do that." Well, no, they won't. I mean, belief is taught enough now by enough people for most people to understand. I mean, the great athletes of the world, if they believe they're going to win, they will win because they apply their mind and all their faculties towards it. But I really do believe that anyone can dowse. You just have to leave behind your disbelief and your preconceived ideas, because we're all transceivers.
Or the fact that we've lost, like I've got 3 little kids and I'm teaching them, about magic. Or that's why I keep using that word, because I use it with them because I want to teach them all that stuff to, the other day I was saying the only reason that stops you from being able to do these things is belief. And you have to believe in all these things, learning about the moon and just trying to stop that whole period of your life where you get disconnected from being able to do the sort of things that we're talking about here, to access the quantum and,
And I would tell you, children make the best dowsers because they don't believe they can't do it.
Exactly.
There's a wonderful bit of footage somewhere. I don't know if it's on YouTube, but it's Michael Bentine, who was a brilliant dowser. Michael Bentine's he was part of the Goons. He's a comedian in England. And he's walking with a whole row of children across a field, and he's trying to teach them to find underground water. And when they cross this watercourse, all their dowsing rods, as one, all cross together. It's just fabulous. The children haven't got half a lifetime of conditioning saying it can't be done, or it's, don't be silly, darling,
Absolutely. And I feel like we're coming into an age where a lot of conscious people are raising their kids to have belief in these types of things because, before the new lockdown reality we're in right now, there was a lot of people raising their kids in a more conscious way and, learning about manifesting and all that type of thing. So it's more mainstream for people to be in tune with the idea that you can actually, internally manipulate or, change your external reality just with your electromagnetic field and all that type of thing. I do a lot of sort of learning from, I love Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he takes people through that journey. And I imagine you kind of really like this guy too, because being a science geek, imagine you just like that whole kind of, this guy's amazing. I didn't really say anything there, but do you sort of read Dr. Joe Dispenza's books or anything like that?
I have in the past. I haven't read one recently.
Yeah, they're hard to read. They're really hard to read, but they're amazing. Okay, well that has actually just completely enlightened me with the whole thing of the dowsing. I know when I've done done a reading with you or you've read for me, the way that you go through that process, you sound like the most experienced doctor that's ever been on the planet. Like you do, and you can hear, it sounds like you're talking to somebody, he's showed his levels of selenium and blah, 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 like all these words. You've obviously been doing it for such a long time that, your knowledge of medicine and minerals and the way the body works is just unbelievable. How many?
That's kind. Thank you for saying that. And it's been 35 years I've been researching health, at least, and fascinated by it, even when I was at school and doing A-level biology, actually, but fascinated by it. And I'm a perfectionist, and I wanted to perfect this procedure, this protocol of causative diagnosis, to the best it could possibly be. And that's my drive, my motivation. And I read something like 30 health newsletters a week, because you've got to be up on all the latest discoveries and the latest everything, because
you are.
I'm not limited by my lack of knowledge, because what I do when I'm dowsing on this is actually determine if somebody has breast cancer, then I'm going to identify how many causative factors. There may be 2 or 3 or 4. There's never one, might be 5. Causative factors, contributory factors, 1 or 2 possibly, and a trigger factor, possibly or possibly not. And within those numbers, say I've got 5 causative factors, 1 contributory factor, and 1 trigger factor. I know that I've got to find those. And Dowsing will keep saying no until I've got it exactly right. And so we've got each individual person's recipe. And within that, I need to find that particular number exactly of what the causative, contributing, trigger factors are. And then we've got that. That's the basis of then working on how we return the body back to balance.
And how does having access to this type of information sort of integrate it into you just trying to live a normal life? Like, you know, how we're all just out there as humans trying to make blind decisions. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Like, you kind of have access to never making the wrong... I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, how far will you take that? Do you try and, like, take risks? Or do you, like, check everything first?
It changes and develops over the years. I mean, you get to the point, in fact, and I do say this in the book, is that, when you actually can dowse, when you've perfected the dowsing, you'll no longer need to dowse because you'll just know. And some practitioners actually see dowsing as really a guiding and a teaching tool to open up perceptions. Mm-hmm. So you're training your perception all the time. So I test myself sometimes if, I'll look at a pot of cottage cheese that's well beyond its in the fridge, and I think, is that? And I'll smell it first and then look for obvious signs. And then if I'm uncertain, then I'll just do a quick douse and see if this is deteriorated in any way and if it's still safe to eat without causing any untoward effects. So, but I'll probably do that less. Though you go through peaks and troughs. At some point you do it all the time. With clients, all the structural stuff, the very physical stuff, for example, the toxins within the body, identifying toxins and also identifying exactly deficiencies or insufficiencies of nutrition. I would do with the dowsing. But then when we get to more fuzzy areas with, say, for example, I have a section in the exploratory process, which is mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual. And if there's a causative factor that comes under that, you could be there forever dowsing because it's complex. And generally with that now, I hear I hear voices. You hear voices. I'm told I can hear what the issues are, and I do channel quite a lot when we get to that.
Because I sort of felt like you were talking to people. So when did that start happening again?
I don't know. I think it probably came in so gradually, and as with anyone who dowses, when your confidence grows, and particularly when I tell somebody something and it's confirmed by medical tests, and that's how it happened so many times now, that your confidence starts to build and you start to trust the information. So at some point when your awareness opens up, I'm either shown things or I hear things or see things, or sometimes in the early days, the rods used to point to things. I remember with a client once it was very early on, she had breast cancer and one of the main causative factors. And I said, "Oh, give me a clue, please." And the rod swung round and pointed underneath my arms.
Wow.
And I said, "Deodorant, antiperspirant," and there was a big yes. That was the main causative factor, because the levels of aluminium and parabens that were being absorbed because she was using so much of it. And so, I have hundreds of examples of stuff like that. that just gives you an idea. So it's a gradual process. I didn't wake up one morning. That's funny because one of the psychics that I went to for years to give me guidance was actually an Irish priest for years. And one day, he wasn't psychic at all. One day he fell down the stairs, hit his head, and when he woke up, he was psychic. And I always joke about this thing. He became psychic overnight. You know, he could see, hear, feel everything. And
something moves in his brain.
All these years, I mean, most of my life I've been in training. And he does it overnight, you know. But so for me, it was a gradual process. But probably came on in leaps and bounds.
It sounds a little bit like it is, as you said before, like just tools, another, you know, just to tune into what some people would call just their intuition. Like, as you said, we all have the ability, you know, I hear a lot about all different, you know, spiritual philosophies will talk about we all have that natural gift of intuition, for example. There's messages coming at us all the time, but we are trained not to hear them as little kids, and we grow up to be adults and we just live in the mind, and we stop feeling these other messages that sometimes come into our bodies. So we can feel it that way, and we're just completely disconnected to it. And I guess it's the same type of thing, and using the dowsing rods to do that.
Dowsing rods are almost more a confirmation now. I mean, people can listen to the intuition, but actually get, you know, a physical manifestation of a yes or a no, or all the areas in between. But really, it's all about heart-based living. You know, you listen to your heart. You think with the heart rather than the head, and then you'll get the answer, because the heart doesn't know how to be not truthful.
So, Elizabeth, I'm going to, you know, mention the elephant in the room. So we're living in a new reality. There's a lot of stuff going on. So how far are you going in terms of trying to get to the bottom of this? Because I know for me, I'm really curious, and I've only got YouTube and a few different things to sort of go by. And
YouTube is getting smaller by the day with all the censorship. It's extraordinary.
Things I'm sending to people, by the time they get it, it's gone. Okay.
I keep sending emails out in, listen to this now, and 5 minutes later it's gone. How far? Yeah. 2 months ago, the client started to ask me, what's your take on this? What's happening? So
everybody would ask you that question. So maybe you could do it.
I did. So everybody was. And I started to answer people individually. In the end, I did an information sheet, which I sent out to clients who've asked, not requested. Not that I would push information like this on anyone.
No, it'd have to be asked.
The overview is that it's certainly a battle between light and dark. And it's a huge turning point in the consciousness of the earth. That is the bigger picture.
Yep.
And it's interesting, I wrote on Instagram this morning that I listened to an Eckhart Tolle yesterday that put things suddenly in perspective, and it was about you only really grow in the face of adversity. Adversity pushes you to go deeper. And you don't grow when you're in your comfort zone, and this certainly has pushed everyone out of the comfort zone hugely. Having said all that, I have a real problem with the received information of what is supposed to be going on. And the biggest problem I have with believing it all is that nobody's actually isolated a virus yet. There's no proof that a virus actually exists.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm assuming that anyone who's listening to this interview, one thing, I was going to do a podcast about this, and it's something that I've noticed is that I think that the more consciously open or consciously aware you are as a person sort of is in direct alignment with how questioning you are about the official narrative. You know, so if you're not conscious on any level, you're just going along with whatever, and if you're a little bit conscious, maybe you're a little bit fishy, thinking something's not quite going on around here. And so I'm assuming that anyone listening to this has got questions, starting to question what's, the official story, which is interesting because you're beginning to see that happening on, I don't watch it, but someone sent me a couple of things. What's that news channel? The one that the Australian one owns it, not Foxtel, it's being completely taken out of my head. One of the mainstream media channels are beginning to sort of run stories about, this story might not be exactly as they're suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, I'll keep moving forward from that. So obviously David Icke speaks about that recently with Brian Rose on
David Icke's been speaking about it for 30 years.
Absolutely, absolutely. The man looks tired. He looks really tired.
I would imagine he is. He's exhausted in the face of adversity. But he's rising, he's stepping up to the plate. What he's doing is extraordinary work.
Amazing. And just to hear, you could hear the pain, or just I could feel what he went through, like what it was like at that period of time when he first came out, decades ago, and how he couldn't walk in anywhere in his town, just being completely ridiculed at that level. It's hard for anyone to imagine that level. Extraordinary.
But I also, when I see that all the very credible and highly qualified doctors, professors who know their work, virologists, actually come out and say, well, this is not how it is. This is not, the virus has not been isolated. That's not me saying that. That's not me dowsing on that. The dowsing is in accord with that. The virus has not been identified. And there is one doctor in America who put out a reward for information that could prove the virus exists and has been isolated, purified and isolated, and nobody stepped up for the prize money.
How interesting.
Out of thousands of views around the world, nobody has. And that's not to say that people aren't dying from something, but it's certainly not what they're saying it is.
Mm. Yeah, I did sort of what I call my conspiracy theory training maybe about 10 years ago, and was quite into it. And it went for a few years and then kind of let it go. It was just time, I suppose, because you've just got to get on with your life. Once you kind of crack it and you see that everything isn't the way it is, you sort of let it go. Well, you do for me, because I'm not in that, I'm just at that point, just a general person getting along with life. But then, of course, as soon as this starts unfolding, it's like, it all comes back to you and it's like, hang on a minute, I've seen this before, exactly the way it was predicted. And, of course, it's just an extraordinary tale. But then, of course, as you said, you for me personally, looking into there's many different layers to it. As you said, you've got the physical layer, which is the real world, the 3D, and then you've got the invisible world layer, which, from what I understand, it sounds like we've already won.
Yeah.
Street is.
Sorry, you cut out there. I didn't quite hear the last bit.
Yeah, in the, speaking to a lot of the sources who are dealing in the invisible world, a lot of them are just giving the indication that we're already victorious, the light.
I think the light is always victorious, but and I think that it's a process and it's unfolding. And I think the light is there. It has to filter down though and it's already started. It has to filter through to the awakening process, and that takes a while.
Exactly. I think that's kind of where I feel like it's at. It's just about, some people just have this dying need to go around helping wake people up. Because without people waking up to the dark plan, or, all the atrocities that have been going on and what's going on at the moment, nothing changes, and we go lambs into the slaughter. Not literally, but who knows, maybe.
No, I think also as a note of caution that You have to allow people to wake up in their own time, because if they're not ready to hear information, they won't hear it.
Oh, they don't.
And in fact, this is the same for any spiritual practice. If somebody's not ready, you can plant the seeds, but you can't force them to understand it or take it on board if it's outside their belief system. And that's the natural process, because we evolve, all of us. We evolve and we grow in levels of consciousness as an organic process. It's not something that you get given. Your level of consciousness is a reflection of who you are and how you're living your life in reality. And so people evolve at different speeds and in different directions. And there will be people who will never in their current lifetimes reach that level of awareness, perhaps. But we're all consciousness. We're all infinite consciousness having an experience. That's the point of being here. We're all living, and there are people of high levels of consciousness that will be more drivers than others, but they will be at some level waking people up. And it's astonishing for most people. Most people, it is simply not in their consciousness that the world is being run as it is being run by a small group of beings, and simply cannot take it on board, because they don't think that human beings could be that negative to other human beings. It's reptilian too shocking. Well, it's too shocking for most people to ever take on board, and so they don't think it's possible. It's not within their sphere of belief.
Which I think when the whole reptilian thing comes into it, I suppose, which, to use David Icke's phrase, I actually think I kind of agree. Like, I don't think that a natural 100% human could be capable of such acts.
The problem with David Icke is that he's been so misinterpreted, and so abused and so vilified and so deliberately.
Campaign.
Absolutely disinformation campaign for David Icke. He's been so misquoted. There will be people who will never really believe it. I mean, and then there's many, many examples of that. The latest one is that people saying, "Oh, David Icke says 5G causes the virus," and actually, no, he never said that ever at any point.
Because he said was quite funny, because he actually says there is no virus. So how could 5G cause a virus? I don't believe in
exactly. But people don't think logically when again it's outside of their belief system. There is a correlation with the symptoms that are caused by electromagnetic exposure and the symptoms that are supposed to be symptoms of this virus. There is a correlation, absolutely. But he's so misinterpreted that I'm not always sure that that's the best place to start for anyone learning this anew right at this moment, because they'll instantly dismiss it.
No, in his long interview that he did recently, he kind of put that phrase in the middle of the interview, and I sort of felt like if I was sort of trying to red pill someone, I'd say watch the first hour and then the last hour, maybe miss the middle hour, just as an intro to the whole thing.
There were 3 long interviews.
Yeah, I'm talking about the most recent one.
The one from last week.
Yeah.
For me, the middle one, the second interview, was perhaps the most powerful.
Okay, I'll have to get onto that one.
Definitely, the second one was the most powerful, I think, for people who are who are new to this. But to balance all that, there are doctors, many doctors out there who are saying exactly the same thing, with the research to back it up. And also, viruses don't work the way most people think they do. I mean, the germ theory of disease has long been discredited. Yeah. One germ, one virus, one bacteria causing disease. It doesn't work like that. The human body's not like that. Even Pasteur, on his deathbed, said, basically, I got it wrong. It doesn't work that way. but it's a very convenient model for the pharmaceutical profession.
What do you mean by that with Louis Pasteur? What do you mean exactly by that?
Complex, but the germ theory of disease, one germ equals one disease. It's not actually about the germ, the bacteria, the viruses. It's more about the terrain of the body, because if you have a healthy, balanced terrain or environment in the body, viruses, bacteria, fungus won't proliferate. We all have bacteria, viruses, say fungus as well in the body. In fact, they're saying we have trillions of viruses in the body. This is the latest I've heard. But they're part of the virome, as bacteria are part of the microbiome of the body. I mean, we're of 100% of cells in our body, 90% are actually the microbiome. We're only 10% human cells.
Gosh.
We're talking bacterial or column of microbes. Only 10% of us, and this is science, this isn't me again. This isn't my Dowsing, although it agrees with it. We're trillions upon trillions of microbes held together with consciousness.
So does that mean it just comes back to the immune system?
I would say more broadly, the terrain or the environment of the body.
Yeah, okay.
Be balanced. And we subject it to so many toxins and stress situations. And it's not just physical toxins. It's also, I had one client whose cancer was simply caused by her beliefs and her thoughts, not by anything physical whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's basically an imbalance in either nutrition, in toxins, or in inappropriate thinking, inappropriate mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual conditioning.
So, Elizabeth, how are you feeling about it all then, just personally? Like, you're feeling peaceful about it? You have some concerns?
You know what? In the beginning, when I sort of dowsed through everything, and I was pretty confident of what was happening on many different levels. It's complex, it's multi-level, and it's profoundly complex.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there are many things happening at the same time.
Yeah.
On many levels. And I was pretty confident. But like anyone else, I've been having my wobbles. And this week, I got very low this week. I couldn't pull myself out of it. And in fact, I wrote on Instagram today that, I heard a voice in my head saying, well, is this the grandest version of the highest vision of yourself? Embarrassingly, no. Are you totally in alignment with your purpose of being? Absolutely not. How do I get out of this? At least I had that logical process.
Yeah.
So my two go-tos, one is Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks, who's done a fabulous, presentation about staying in your vortex. But the second one, which even for me was even more inspiring in a way, was Eckhart Tolle. And basically what I wrote about this morning was how you thrive, how you grow in adversity. And on YouTube, you can listen to this. And I think that would help lift anyone out when they're having a wobbly. I can tell you what to search on, actually.
Yeah, I might get you to email it to me afterwards, and I can put a link to it with this when I upload this interview, so anyone can go and check it out. Because that sounds, if it's helped you, I'm sure it will help anybody. And
Absolutely. It's basically staying conscious in the face of adversity. And it brings you back to he does it so brilliantly in his own way, bringing you back to the present, is remaining present and remaining conscious.
And that's really important. I think I'm kind of in the rabbit hole as well, and, all the different layers and levels to it. I must admit, I haven't sort of had any fear. I don't have any fear. I don't really have those dark moments. I don't know why, I just feel really, it's not positive. It's just, I don't feel fearful. I just don't think it's going to work. I sort of said very early on in this piece that just because nobody in history, in just physical wars, like on the human plane, never has a war been waged where anyone's going to know who's going to win it at the start. Never. It's always a surprise. And I just see that it's just not going to work. People are waking up so quickly. Like back when I was learning about all this, 10 or so years ago, if I imagined it unfolding, I don't think I would have thought in a million years that people would have been waking up as quickly as they are. And I find that really comforting.
It's definitely gathering speed.
Yeah.
Hugely.
Getting really rapid. So that's enough for me, I think. And for me, I worked out really quickly about making sure, and we'll talk about the quantum too, making sure that you're putting your energy into the right potential time, future timeline that you want to be in alignment with. So if I was going to be in fear, I was kind of feeding that potential reality as well. Just to making sure that I need to be aware of what's going on, but I don't want to be sitting in the fear the whole time. I think that's really important for people, just to be basically focusing on the positive outcome.
The worst thing is sitting there and listening to media and checking the media, because you ain't going to get the truth from the media. You're not going to get truth from mainstream media. The Project Fear is, I'm lost for words. They're very skillful at it, but Project Fear is extraordinary. You sit listening to that all day, or even half the day, or even some of the day, that'll take you down really, really quickly. And I do believe that in the collective consciousness, there's a thought form that if you resonate with that, if you get into that, you resonate at that fear level of the fear, the thought form, you will make yourself ill anyway, because it will suppress the immune function.
Absolutely, cells aren't.
And this is why it's so important what Eckhart Tolle says about remaining in the presence and staying utterly conscious, not getting sucked into it. It is. I've over my long life, I've seen many campaigns to mainstream media to control people, but this is quite unprecedented. Really,
this is it. I feel like it's their last go. Like if they're going to unleash this, fail, and move on, like they're done. There's nothing else that comes after this in terms of what crap that they've been doing, over the however many millennia. That's it, as far as I can see. Done. Nothing is bigger than this. This is what it's all been about the whole time. It feels like that. You know what I mean? When you talk about David Icke, for example, and all of the people who've been talking about this agenda for a long time, it's here and they're giving it a go, but it's not going to work. Like I just don't see it working at all.
Well, a high level of consciousness will always displace a low level of consciousness, and that's the thing to hang on to. But that doesn't mean to say it's not going to be tough.
Yeah, I do think it is going to be
on the way, and it is a tough time, and this is why we also have to be kind to ourselves. It's really important to forgive yourself, and when I read somewhere somebody said, oh, I'm okay for 4 days, then on the 5th day I have a complete wobble, then I'm okay for 4 days, then I have a wobble, and on those wobbly days it's okay. It's okay, and if you can manage not to sit in front of Netflix, we don't have a television, by the way, at all. If we can, and basically comfort eat, but rather, luckily, what I did was to go to Eckhart Tolle or Esther Abraham Hicks, to get you back on track, but people not to be too hard on themselves, because this is massive. This is such a challenge, especially people who are being newly opened up.
And don't you think it's really interesting that everyone's sort of talking about fear, but I'm beginning to think that fear isn't our biggest problem at the moment. It's almost like judgment and anger is kind of overtaking that. People not seeing other people. One thing I am mainly concerned about, actually. In fact, my main concern would be this, is the divide that's going to be created between the believers and the not believers. Because I've seen that strategy roll out. We've seen it East and West and Muslim, Christian, like the whole thing, China, America. This has been a strategy of theirs the whole time, to divide and conquer. So now it's going to be who's believing in vaccinations, who isn't, who's going to get.
It's the duality. You see, it's the duality of the Earth's realm, and as we evolve through the dimensions, 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, the duality starts to go. But what you're getting at the moment is those forces that tend to control.
Well, I feel like
human consciousness is that they are using people to divide and conquer.
Yes, and who's going to be outcasted? Like, I can see, and I was going to do a podcast about this, and it was going to be called "You're Going to Blame Me." Like, when it comes to a point where people are going to know that I'm not going to download. In Australia, we've got this tracking app that that we're meant to download, and the way the media are creating it is like they're actually saying, "Come on, guys, you're holding everyone back. Download this, do it for us." So basically,
it's very, very clever. It's very, very clever psychological techniques.
Absolutely. So as soon as anyone finds out that I'm not into that, they're going to blame me for it. They're going to blame me that we can't go out of the house. They're going to, not me personally, but us. And when I'm saying we don't want to get vaccinated, they're going to blame us. And then, of course, that's probably my main concern. I can see that there's going to be a real disenfranchisement and a divide. And I suppose that's the thing that probably concerns me the most, is knowing that we're heading into that reality for how long, I don't know how long that's going to be, but there is probably going to be some of that happening.
It's about getting the truth out there, though.
Absolutely, and that's it. I mean, I'm not going to hold back. Like, no way. I don't have to. I've got 3 little kids. I can't be mucking around with people who, haven't bothered to invest any of their. I mean, when the stakes are so high, The United Nations talk about potentially between 30 to 130 million people dying of starvation due to this lockdown. And the stakes are massive, right? And if people can't take the time to look further than the official narrative on that junk TV that has been proven through history so many times to be a propagandist tool, if you haven't taken any time to look deeper than that, then God help you and God help us all. And I haven't got time to be dealing with people who are so uneducated. Like, it's worthless time. And it's sad. I don't want to be angry about it, but it's frustrating because the information is there, that the internet is full of it. It's full of it. It doesn't take very long at all, really. As you
people
said,
will only take on board what they are able to at their level of consciousness.
Yes, thank you for that.
They will. And actually, if you switch in your extreme moments, if you switch your anger to compassion,
yes,
so many people don't have the ability or don't have the level of consciousness or don't have the practical means. I mean,
I understand exactly what you're saying. You're right. I often do that because it's like, it's in Japanese. They don't know Japanese. They don't know English. They can't help themselves, and I totally get it. Thank you for reminding me, Elizabeth. And I think I'm going to let you go at that stage because I've held you up for a really long time.
No, you weren't holding me up at all. It's been a huge pleasure.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And thank you for your beautiful insights. It was amazing getting to know you better and also understanding the dowsing on such a deeper level too,
We hope you enjoyed this interview. To hear more, please subscribe to the podcast or learn more about Jodie at healyou.me.